So good morning, everyone. Very happy to be here and to have you today. So it's 9 a.m. and we are going to talk about governance today. So it's good wake up, and sorry about that, but let's try to make it interesting. Maybe just for starters, quick introduction. So I'm Jeremy. I'm a senior engineering manager at BlaBlaCar, and working on several topics about like internal tools for BlaBlaCar employees and automation and integrations. And today, so we are going to talk about the paradigm between what we call now citizen developers, and on the other part, centralized IT and matters that it raises in terms of governance, in terms of unleashing the power of no code within the organization while keeping like certain amount of control around that. And basically, so we can also have like Q&A at the end of the session, but feel free, I think I don't have that many slides, so we can take questions along the way, so feel free to interrupt me if you have any questions. Just a quick word about BlaBlaCar, because in France it's like super famous, but not everyone here comes from France. So BlaBlaCar is the world's leading community-based travel app. So basically in 2022 we had more like 1 million bookings per week. So it's a carpooling and bus travel mobile app and website, and so we have a base of I think 120 million members, and 22 of them active, unique active, 26, sorry, active, and so we are here in 21 countries, and we have all like 700 employees all over the world. So, for what is gathering here today, maybe we need to make a quick focus about a given technology that we are using at BlaBlaCar, because I think that matters of governance can also depend on the technology that you are using and on the matters and the issues that you are trying to solve. So here we are going to talk about Workato, and saying a few words about that because I know as well that Workato is not super famous in France. It's more known abroad, especially in the US. So basically for French people, Workato is a strong competitor of Make on that part. In terms of, I was just at the booth of Make just before, and basically they told me that features that was practically the same on that part. They was best, obviously, but basically the same. And so Workato, so it's they have like 11,000 customers with I think something like 3,000 built-in connectors, and so it's an integration platform as a service, and it has been nominated as a leader in the Gartner 2023 study, and with like very powerful features in terms of building connectors, building automations, monitoring these automations, and also providing like a very strong customer experience. What are we doing with Workato at BlaBlaCar? So several things. Basically, we started working on automation. It's like very super mainstream use case, I would say, about IT operations, onboarding, you know, new employees coming, creating some accounts, preparing the laptops, etc., etc. On the other part, like offboarding, switching off the accounts, preparing like every actions when an employee leaves the company. So that was really the first type of use case that we addressed, and that is like generally one of the first that companies address on that part. And when we progressively expanded the scope to several use cases, including some very core business ones on that part. To give you an example, on our operated buses activity, so you may have seen like BlaBlaCar buses in the street, like the big red, orange, coral one. So we use it a lot in order to synchronize like business systems one with each other, in order to automate some tasks. In order, I don't know if lately you have taken a bus and you received a SMS saying that the bus was going to be late. Sorry if it was late, but basically the SMS was sent by Workato. So based on our geolocation system that calculates delay and then sends SMS. We also have all type of business automation linked to the operated buses part. We also have a lot of people processes. So basically, when a candidate is hired in our recruiting system, that creates the hire in our HR systems, prepare everything, etc. We use it also for a facilities team to manage badges, access to BlaBlaCar building, things like this. So talent acquisition, I already talked a bit about hiring, but also we use it to synchronize the information on the website, jobs.blablacar.com, in order to provide all the job offers and all blog articles to showcase that on our website. And also for a trust and safety team, and for example, that we use Workato to manage crisis cells, because unfortunately we have some crisis at some point. And so basically here, very broadly, it's like a Slack command. When you type like /crisis cell, create channels, onboard everyone, send email, gather everyone, and then manage the process of the crisis cell. So that's what we have today on that part. And so for sure, we didn't, so we built, and I'm gonna say we, the engineering team, we built most of it so far, but we are right now, there is a willingness of expand the usage of Workato within the organization and within the company, so to open the gates to more people. And here comes not the right button. Here comes the need to find some balance, basically, between like two, I would say one, what I would call a utopia on one side, and one maybe more like too rigid world. So first of all is the citizen devs, and basically unleashing the power, giving that to everyone in the company, allowing like anything to be done at any time, building MVPs, like having the business responsible of the digitization of the company, improve the time to market, smoothing the IT bottleneck, because we have roadmaps, it's always complex, etc., etc. So that's one part, and basically that's the business willingness, I would say, on that part. And then after that, we have the other world with IT, basically. And on IT, so IT are always like, set the mood and the ambience bad, but basically there are some constraints on that part, because at the end of the day, IT is responsible of ensuring the security and the scalability of the assets that we are building through technologies. And also to minimize overlaps, because, and that's one of the challenges of the no-code, is that since it's very easy, super easy to do, and there is no like strong governance, you can have two people in the company working on the exact same case, building the same thing differently on that part. And linked to that, also an issue about optimizing costs, because no-code and low-code technologies are not free on that part, and the most you use it, the most it costs. So that means that there is a matter of optimization and having the control of the overall budget. Just to give you an example about that, coming back to Workato, we pay at an automation use case level. So that means that each use case costs us X. So that means that there is a real constraint and a real challenge about being sure that we don't have two people building the same use case, because basically it will cost exactly twice what we are supposed to pay. So that challenge is like for everyone in the room, I would say, and everyone in the low-code and the no-code industry. So how did we, I wouldn't say tackle it, because I'm not sure we are there yet, but how are we trying to tackle it? So basically, we called what we call a federated operating model. So basically, how does it work? We rely on what we call factories. So factories are really like small teams or people within each department that are responsible for building and maintaining their own automation, their own use cases. Okay, so they have like Workato admin licenses, and they can build automations on that part. But we also have what we call an automation HQ, which is in my team. And the automation HQ is responsible of supporting these automation factories inside, and is responsible of the overall governance and scalability of the platform. So there is a centralized responsibility on that part. So it says, so we have like we have a IT ops factory, we have a trust and safety factory. Tomorrow we'll have a people factory, maybe an operated buses factory, etc., etc. So that means that any department can have its own factory, and there is one single automation HQ responsible for governing, enabling, also like leveraging all the capabilities, encouraging the usage of Workato, and basically is responsible of unleashing this power in a controlled way, I would say, on that part. So how does it work concretely speaking? Yes. So let's say that the finance team comes to me and say, okay, I want to use Workato because I want to connect like the ERP with treasury system. I want to better manage invoices, etc. So I want to have my own factory. So first of all, I say yes, because I'm a nice guy. But then I said but. So how does it work at BlaBlaCar? So basically, we have a three-step process in order to become like an official factory with all the stamps on it, etc. So first, for sure, we have an onboarding phase. So we are responsible of this onboarding phase about demonstrating the product, what it does, how it's used, what are the main features, setting up different roles so that we don't have like everyone in the company that can use it, but we have several admins that we need to be registered, etc. Each factory has its own environment in order not to mess with other automations in the company. So that's more like technical setup, I would say. Also for them to read existing documentation that we have produced about the platform, how it works, what are the main constraints, etc., and also to understand what is the current scope in order for them not to reproduce something that already exists. But that's quite theoretical, I would say, at this point. Then we have a certification process, and so that's one advantage of Workato provides some official certifications. There are like 3 levels: Automation Pro 1, 2, 3. And so that means that we don't activate the accounts on Workato platform until the future admins have not passed the 2 first certification over 3. We encourage it for having the 3 ones, but basically the 2 first ones are mandatory. So that means that we make sure by doing that, and they are not like that much complicated, it doesn't take months to pass, but we ensure that basically we give access to admins that have at least like the minimum understanding and knowledge about how does it work, what are the main things to check, what are the main issues, etc. So to have a minimum level of knowledge before building any automations. So that's the second part. And then the third part is collaboration. And so basically that means that we have 2 ways of doing it. First of all, we never let a factory building its first use case alone. So that means that for the first 2, 3 use cases, depends on the complexity. We work with them about that. So that means that we co-build the automation with them in order to help them ramp up on the usage of the platform, and also to make sure that they have understood correctly and to say and to show them any tips, any tricks, etc. on that part. So that's the first part. And then after that, less funny part on that part is that as Automation HQ, so we are responsible at the end of the day about the way it is used. So that means that we perform recurring, I call it audits. I'm not sure it's the right word, but deep dives on like people and recipes that we see to say, okay, we are going to check if I don't see anything like terrible. We don't challenge the whole like process, automation, way it is built. The idea is not to make like a code review on that part, but basically to take some checkpoints and say, okay, the way it has been built, maybe it's not perfect. Maybe like some pure experts would have been building it differently, but at least it doesn't seem like terrible, and so that means it can work that way. The idea is not to have like super experts all along the way. It's more to have like medium experts and a few very strong experts that help them within the company. So when we are talking about best practices, so it's always quite hard to talk about best practices when you talk about that kind of things, because then we talk about architecture topics and things that can be like quite blurry at some point for business users as well. So in terms of best practices, what do we have here? So there are some recommendations and there are some things we don't negotiate about, basically. So what we don't negotiate about is that basically all new automation ideas, so basically a factory say, okay, I want to improve the way it builds on invoices, once again. So we have a community of basically Workato admins, Workato users, and so that means that sharing the idea of the automation is a prerequisite to start building it. This community doesn't validate the automation, so it's not a decision making, it's just sharing, and so we hope that everyone does it spontaneously. Basically, the idea of sharing it before doing it, we are raising 2 purposes. First of all, it means that we challenge altogether what I call the automation value. No-code and low-code technologies are super easy to use, super powerful, etc. But at the end of the day, you can automate anything. And when you automate anything, you automate things that don't really need to be automated. We made an experiment to prove that, is that with Workato and with some wires, basically I have a Slack comment with /coffee that triggers the coffee on the machine. We did it. So you can do that with no-code technology. maybe it doesn't need to spend 3 or 4 days of someone to build it because it's not super useful. So that means that we'll challenge the automation value. Are you sure that you are automating something that really needs to be automated, that brings value, that you won't spend like too much time and much time building it, that's using it? And then after that, that's also the occasion to to make sure that we don't have overlaps and say, okay, you have this idea, but basically your friend here is doing practically the same thing, then probably you need to sync up together because there is something common that couldn't be built. So that's the first part, but really it's like community-based on that part. And then for a more technical perspective, we have two things that we systematically put in place. So basically, Workato offers a system of monitoring in terms of tasks consumption. And so that means that we agree with people about what would be the volume of automation that you are aiming for. And we put some controls in it that raises some alerts if we see that the volume of task is going wild, because basically it links to the billing after that and with the cost that it will represent. So that means that we put some controls on it just to be sure that we have a fair usage and a fair volume of tasks. If we see that it's going wild, it can mean two things, basically. Maybe it had been poorly estimated at the first part, but so that raises the question of the ROI and the automation value on that part, because the cost will increase on that part. Or it could also say that the recipe has not been properly implemented and that we are generating some loops, something like this, etc., that raise the number of tasks. And so that's where we can help them. And then last of that is also a bit technical, but basically we request that all automations that are implemented include an alerting logic in terms, when automation fails, and that happens because there is like improper data, there is improper API call, whatever. Not to have like automations running everywhere and sometimes they fail, we don't know why, etc. And so basically that each factory, when implementing a new recipe, to set up an alerting logic that basically send a Slack message that you can see here when a recipe fails in order to be alerted about this recipe failed today and for that reason. So it's more like a more technical log approach, but with low-code and no-code technology, just to make sure that we don't have recipes that fail every day without anyone understanding why. And that's it. I thought I had one more slide about that, but basically that's the kind of rules that we implemented. And so far at BlaBlaCar, so we have 4 factories, and we are aiming for more. As an automation HQ, we also play the role of factory ourselves for teams that don't want to invest in technical and low-code, no-code skilled resources. So I took the example of people, but for example, the people department will probably not willing to create its own factory. And so that means that we will be playing the role of the people factory, but at the end of the day, if they are wanting to create one someday, that would be totally fine. But for now, that's the role that we are playing. Yes?
You spoke about Workato, which is similar to Zapier and Make, and it is for ops, for automating tasks. What about all the other no-code tools out there? Those where we are building apps, where we are building, where we are building mobile application, native applications, or how do you control those?
So we don't have that many no-code tools at BlaBlaCar. So basically, we have Workato, we have Webflow, and we are using low-code capabilities of Salesforce as well to build some apps. So I won't have like a generic answer to your question. But if I take the example of Webflow, it's basically the same. So that means that, okay, you are willing to build a new website with Webflow, and that's good. But basically, we have our team who were the first, I would say, the early adopters and early users of the technology. And we help you about defining, okay, is Webflow the solution? What do you need to have in mind? And then after that, to co-build together. And after one time, so if I take the example of the jobs.blablacar.com, we first built it internally, but now the maintenance is totally delegated to the people team, for example, on that part, because we have taken this path and taken the time going first, we did it, then we did it together, and after that, they did it.
Okay, thank you. So another following up question is, what internal tools did you build to help yourself do your job properly? Because you are managing a lot of tooling and a lot of people are having access to those tooling, and you end up building a lot of things or having a system that grows up. How do you keep control of that to, for instance, when someone comes to you and tells you, I want to build X,
how do you tell them we already have it? So you have some documentation. You spoke a little bit about that. Could you tell us a bit more?
So we have documentation for sure. We have a big like Confluence space with all use case, register, what they do, etc. And we have basically we use a lot Slack at BlaBlaCar. So we have a Slack channel with a Workato community. So that means that anyone can bring up a new ID by that saying, okay, I want to build that, and so that everyone is writing. And we also have like frequent meetups with all the Workato communities to share about what are the topics that we are currently working on, just to make sure that we have this synchronization and saying that, hey, you are working on that, but I'm basically doing the same right now. So maybe we just need to take a step back and think together about how to build something. But that, I would say that since we are putting a lot of prerequisites and pre-controls, the after part is quite easy because basically we don't have that many people. You know, it's not the whole company that is on it. And so we have this culture of sharing spontaneously that, okay, this is a new thing that I'm currently working on. For sure, we are not expecting people to say, okay, I was sending an SMS with a dot at the end and I want to put a comma. Okay, whatever, you don't need us to do that. But more about, okay, I want to create a new use case on that part. And basically, if you create a new use case without telling anyone, at the Automation HQ, we will see it because we have the overall administration of the platform. So that means that, but so far, and let's hope it will be that in the future, we didn't see any case where basically someone forgot, you know, to put everyone in the loop. And the good thing about that, what makes it work is what I say is that the community is not a decision process. It's really a sharing about how being challenged about what you do and about getting tips, etc. So that means that you don't take the risk. Basically, you don't have to say, okay, maybe if I talk about it before doing it, there is a risk of being like shut down. It doesn't happen because that's not the objective. At the end of the day, if you want to do it, let's do it. But just you have to be aware of the cost that it represents, cost that will fall in your P&L. And so that means that if you want to do it, let's do it. But we just advise that maybe you could do it differently or there is some better ways.
Thank you for the talk. So I'm Lou. I make apps for smaller agencies, and I was wondering how this can scale down to smaller businesses, maybe teams of like 10, because automation would probably benefit us the most as everyone's doing a little bit of everything. So do you have recommendations maybe for smaller teams?
I will take 1 minute to think about that. So just to give you an idea, so BlaBlaCar was 700 people, but basically people working on Workato, there are only like, I would say 5 or 6 of them so far. So it's quite, you know, reduced on that part. And so that means that because there is a ramp up and like a learning curve that you need to address these kind of things. So on my side, I'm not, but that's personal view, I would say, I'm not a super fan about like in a team of 10 people, having 10 people being able to do these kind of things, because I think that at the end of the day, optimizing processes, building automations, using tool is one specific skill set. I don't consider it as part of the job description, basically. You need to have a mind about thinking about how you could improve your job, but then doing it, that's something that I would rather put a little bit more centralized within each team that, you know, giving the ability for everyone to do it. But then at the end of the day, it can work also. But then the key is really this kind of communication, this kind of spontaneous sharing. Because if you have 10 people doing the same thing on the same tool, you know, and for the same kind of things, there will be some overlaps at some point, and probably sooner than later on that part. So that means that if you want to do that, you really need to have a super straight culture of sharing spontaneously what you are doing, and basically to accept the challenge as well, and to say, okay, I want to automate this because it's super painful, etc. To say, okay, but I understand that you are super hungry at this task, but basically you do it twice a year, and it takes 2 hours. It could take 5 minutes, okay? But you will spend 2 days building the automation. So at the end of the day, it's not a good ROI on that part.
Yeah, I guess maybe a follow-up question is, you gave an example of a not very optimized or not very valuable automation. Do you have an example of very valuable automation that you put in place?
Yes, a recent example is quite a simple one, is that so we have buses traveling to the UK. So they are taking the ferry to cross the channel. and we need to send to the ferry company 24 hours in advance the number of passengers for each bus on that part. Because if we don't do it, basically they charge us twice the price on that part. And so we'll build something that basically took 1 day to build with Workato, retrieving the number of passengers 24 hours in advance, putting everything in an email that is automatically sent. And so that means that basically it represents like savings or a few, like I think nearly 100k euros per year on that part, with a 1 day build automation, replacing a task that otherwise will require someone, you know, to each day go gather, consolidate numbers, send emails, etc. on that part. So that's the simple example. I think there was
what made you choose Workato rather than Zapier or Make or any other?
So Zapier, we didn't choose it for sure because you don't have the ability to build your own connectors on that part. You need to use like library ones, and for sure we are using Salesforce, Jira, Slack, etc. So these connectors exist, but also if I take the example of SMS sending or like geolocation system is not on the library on that part. So that means that we wanted this ability to build our own connectors. Back then, when we choose Workato, so it was 2 years ago, we didn't even consider Make back then. I don't know if I make people in the room, and sorry about that. But because basically we had a very like technological approach about saying, basically we looked at the Gartner reports, and Make and Integromat is not part of the Gartner because they are smaller worldwide. Also didn't offer as much advanced feature in terms of integration platform, in terms of monitoring of the automation. Building the automation, basically, all what we are doing with Workato, we could do it with Make. I'm pretty convinced about that. Is that in terms of monitoring and robustness of the platform, it was a part. And since we had this ambition about first starting small with tech people and then progressively spreading, the fact that the UX of Make was a little bit smoother than the Workato one was not a problem, because basically we have this aspect about saying, okay, but people that will be using this platform will be trained people. Would not be necessarily expert, but will be trained people, so that's not a problem if it's not like 100% intuitive every time.
Yes, thanks, Jeremy. Can you elaborate a bit on how your automation HQ fits within the overall organization? How you came up with that organization within your company, and did Workato help you at all, or what was the trial and errors in setting up automation HQ and the governance it has over the other factories?
Yeah, sure. So to answer, not in the right order, but we were helped by Workato doing that, because basically, and if I go back, I'm not responsible of the super graph, it's Workato one on that part, and they offer different models, because basically there is like the super decentralized one, the super centralized, delegated, etc. There are several models that they are offering on that part, and so they helped us determine what was the best for us. And what we did is that initially, Workato was in the ownership of the IT ops team, because they were the first ones that were interesting about that part. And then after that, we found out that, okay, but we could use it not only for IT ops, but for several processes in the part. And so that means that it didn't make any sense anymore to have it in the IT ops, but more in a team, my team was more responsible of business assets on that part. But on the other hand, the IT ops, they ramped it up on the technology, and there were still some use cases. So that means that they wanted to keep the ability for them to build this kind of automations. And so that's why we started thinking about, okay, that's okay, we'll have several teams using it, but from day one, we knew that we needed some control, because that part, the Workato pricing cost is really by use case, so that means that it puts you in a position where you need to put some control, because you know that each time you do something, coffee will cost X, sorting pens will cost X, etc. So that means that we knew from the very first day that we need this kind of control. And so that means that we worked with them and with the other factory that was there, the other people that were working with them, about, okay, what do you want to do by yourself? What do you absolutely want not like an HQ to do on your side? and also about our own conviction, saying, okay, this one maybe it's not ideal, but basically if we don't do it, that's going to be a mess in like 6 months. And so it was really discussion with them first about with teams that were already aware of this kind of challenges to determine what would be the best setup. And now we are more in a like prescriptive way, I would say, for new factories. Say, okay, that's the way it works. We are happy to challenge it and to make it evolve, but for sure there will be some things we won't negotiate about, because we feel and we are convinced about the fact that if we don't do it, we are going to have some issues. And at the end of the day, the budget line is in my team, so that means that I have the ultimate, I would say, decision in my hands. But as I say, this is more like about if people don't want to play with rules. So far, we have not put any blocker to any team, because basically it's more about you want to do that, and that's perfectly fine. But so that means that you need to play with the rules that have been defined, and rules can change, and we are happy to make it change. And we have made some all along the way, but it's still that everyone needs to be in the same playground.
So you picked Walkato 2 years ago, and fast forward today, are you happy with it? Are you vendor locked in? Like, could you leave Walkato if you wanted to? And is it a threat to the business? Because there are today alternatives, like I'm thinking of NA10, which is open source, and Pipedream, which is open source with a really different pricing model, which allows you to do more for less money, I would say. Like, you self-hosting, you have control over everything. And do you feel the need of moving away from something like Walkato to something that is more like you control better, and the pricing especially, that you will control better this way?
So for sure, as like any SaaS editors, there is a part of lock-in. So that means that we cannot just say that tomorrow, if we want to get rid of it, we can do it. There will be some part about things that we need to reproduce at some point on that part. So that's the first part. We didn't take the path about open source and self-hosting, because basically, so as all of you know, there is like a kind of shrinkage of tech resources all over the market, and so we consider that this kind of automations bring value to the business, but are not the very core of our business, that basically is making people travel and matching carpoolers together and selling some bus tickets. And so that means that for sure we have all the technologies and the people that we could host ourselves, etc., things like this. But basically, we prefer to focus them on like more things related to our core strategy and core processes. So that means that we are comfortable with the fact that it's not hosted on our side. And yes, that would mean that it's a risk in terms of business, but like any other SaaS that we are using, basically.
Yes, I was wondering more about who are the people who are responsible of the factories, like what are their personas or their profile, and what amount of their time are they supposed to spend on automating process versus their actual job?
So in terms of personas, we have very various ones. So basically, so we have people in my team that are like not developers but engineers, so that have like engineering mindset in terms of building complex automations, loops, etc. In the IT ops team, it's more like a profile people coming from the software engineering team, so that means more tech people. And then in business factories, so we talked about trust and safety, for example, that's really like non-tech people on that part. But people that were supposed to work on, that had a dedicated job about working on optimizing processes. So that means that they already have the mindset about, okay, how do I optimize something? How do I reduce tasks? Where I connect things on that part. So that's more this kind of topics, coming back to the question that we had before. So I think that's my personal opinion, but you need to have this kind of mindset if you want to properly use, an automation part, because you can build simple automations like any person in the street can build a simple one, but probably simple ones are not the valuable ones. So on that part, so we have these people, and then what share of that job? it's super dependent because basically, if I take the example of the trust and safety team, basically some quarters they really want to automate some things, etc., and some other they don't. So they are not like 25% of the job working on the etc. It depends on the roadmap, basically. One question here.
Yeah, just one more for one detail. You mentioned the pricing is based on the recipes or the scenario or whatever. And at the same time, you mentioned that you monitor volume so that the usage doesn't, go through the roof. So is that more for business reasons then than really the pricing reason, if that doesn't depend? Or are they like thresholds that you're not supposed to?
So all of them, basically. So we monitor them for different reasons. So from a pure tech perspective, because I say if it goes up, maybe probably there is something wrong and that could crash at some point. So that's more like proactive, tech monitoring. First part. There's a little part of green IT about that also, in order not to generate huge volume of servers running out if it's not needed. And then the pricing is that basically each recipe comes with a package of something like 250,000 tasks per year, but that's a bundle. So that means that if you buy 10 recipes, you have 2.5 million of tasks for all that. So you can go up for one recipe and down for another one. But so we still want to monitor that just to make sure that we are not going to exceed any kind of thresholds like this.
It's quite a very simple pricing strategy from Workato. I think we would expect something more complex, like Amazon style. Yeah.
No, it gives some advantages because basically it can scale quite good. Because for example, if you build something that is like 50,000 tasks per year, and you go to 100 or 150, it costs the same, basically. So that means that this one use case can scale with the growth of your company on that part. And then after that, if you go above certain thresholds, then it's another model. Let's say there are over some pricing considerations, but then you start falling back about, okay, should an automation like this, an automation system like this, manage millions and millions of lines, etc. And probably at some point it's maybe more like an ETL or something like this that you need to do this kind of thing.
And is there any recipe that you decided that, oh, we need to do this actually internally, this is too big, this is core actually? Or does this sometimes happens?
Yes, there are some, because basically that were some that would require that the logic, Workato would be a bit more too complex, or Workato works very well with robust APIs, and we don't have like a robust API to put in front, etc. So that could happen, not that much, but more like in ETL for sure we are doing that, and we are growing this data team that use Reverie, Airflow technologies like this that are really done to basically copy-paste mass volume of data from one system to another.
I don't want to use the mic, but just out of curiosity, what were you doing before that automation role
at BlaBlaCar?
At BlaBlaCar, yeah. It's like, where do you come from within the organization?
So before that, I spent like 10 years in consulting, in like processes, organization, and IT transformation projects. And so in BlaBlaCar, I'm responsible basically of a team who manage SaaS system for the business. And so Workato came as basically like as an add-on on that, in order to better connect system one to each other and to streamline processes along these systems. No, we still have a bit of time. No more questions? Okay. Well, in any case, thanks a lot for having me, and feel free if you have any questions or whatever to reach me out. I will be very happy to answer any questions. Thanks a lot, everyone.